My son bought his wife a house and then handed me the mortgage documents. You have saved enough, he said. It is time to help your family. I said no. 3 days later, they sued me for $2 million, claiming I broke a verbal contract made at my wife's funeral. But they forgot who I am. I spent 40 years as a forensic auditor, sending CEOs to prison for moving a decimal point. When I stepped onto the witness stand, I didn't just bring a defense. I brought their financial autopsies. And when the judge looked at the evidence I uncovered, he took off his glasses and asked them just one question. Before I tell you what that question was, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to say no to someone you love. I am Garrison Ford, 69 years old, and I have learned that numbers do not lie, but families do. I was sitting at a corner table at Le Monde, one of Chicago's most pretentious French restaurants, the kind of place where the menu has no prices and the water costs more than gasoline. I had been sitting there for 20 minutes. Alone. My son Declan and his wife Brittany were late. Again. I checked my watch. 22 minutes past 7. In my profession, time is a quantifiable asset. Being late is not an accident. It is a statement. It says that your time is more valuable than mine. I took a sip of my sparkling water and watched the door. I knew exactly what was happening. They were making me wait to assert dominance. It is a negotiation tactic used by insecure middle managers and apparently my own son. Finally, the hostess led them toward me. They did not look apologetic. They looked like they were walking a red carpet. Declan was wearing a suit that was too tight, trying to look like a hedge fund manager, but looking more like a valet parking attendant. Brittany was wearing a dress that probably cost $3,000, clutching a designer bag like a shield. "Sorry we are late, Dad," Declan said, sliding into the booth without making eye contact. Traffic on Lakeshore Drive was a nightmare. It was Sunday. There is no traffic on Lakeshore Drive on a Sunday evening. I did not say anything. I just nodded. Brittany sat down and immediately snapped her fingers at the waiter. "We will start with the Ocetra caviar and a bottle of the Dom Perignon." 2012, she said. Her voice was loud. She wanted the tables around us to know she was spending money. She did not ask me if I wanted champagne. She did not ask the price. She just ordered. I watched her over the rim of my glasses. I have spent my life analyzing fraudsters, embezzlers, and corporate thieves. I know the look of someone who is spending money that does not belong to them. It is a specific kind of hunger, a hunger that is never satisfied. Declan loosened his tie. "So, Dad, you are looking good. Retirement treats you well." "I am not retired, Declan," I said calmly. "I am a consultant." Right. Still hunting down the bad guys." Brittany laughed. It was a sharp, glass-breaking sound. "Oh, Declan, let your father relax. We are here to celebrate. Celebrate what I asked." The champagne arrived. The waiter poured. Brittany raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. I did not raise my glass. I watched them drink. They gulped the expensive vintage like it was soda. Then, before the appetizers even arrived, Brittany reached into her oversized designer bag. She did not pull out a gift. She did not pull out photos. She pulled out a thick, blue-bound legal folder. She placed it in the center of the table right next to the caviar. The sound it made hitting the tablecloth was heavy. It was the sound of a problem. "We found it, Garrison," she said. She dropped the dad act. Now it was business. "Found what I asked." "Our forever home," Declan said. His voice wavered slightly. He was trying to sound confident, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. "It is in North Shore. 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, a heated garage. It is perfect." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at my son. That is good news, Declan. I assume you negotiated a good rate. Brittany pushed the folder across the table toward me. It slid past the candle and stopped inches from my hand. We did better than that, she said, smiling. Her teeth were very white and very sharp. We structured it so the family keeps the wealth. We just need your signature on the guarantor line. I put down my water glass. I wiped my hands on the napkin. Then I opened the folder. It was a mortgage contract. I scanned the numbers. The purchase price was $1.2 million. The down payment listed was 0. The primary borrowers were Declan Ford and Brittany Ford. The guarantor, the person responsible for the entire debt, if they defaulted, was Garrison Ford. I did not look up. I engaged my professional brain. I went into audit mode. I flipped the pages, my eyes scanning the fine print faster than they could follow. Clause 4, Section B, variable interest rate starting at 7%, adjusting annually with no cap. Clause 9, prepayment penalty of 5% for the first 10 years. Additional fees. Origination fee 3 points. Broker fee 2 points. This was not a mortgage. This was a financial death sentence. It was a predatory loan wrapped in a luxury cover. I looked up. Who drew this up? I asked. A friend, Brittany said quickly. He got us a great deal because of your credit score, Garrison. I closed the folder. No. The silence at the table was instant. The clatter of silverware from other tables seemed to get louder. What do you mean, no? Declan asked. His face went red. I mean no, I said. I am not signing this. This is a bad deal, Declan. The interest rate is uncapped. The fees are astronomical. And the price. $1.2 million for a property in that specific zip code. That is 20% over market value. Brittany's smile vanished. She leaned forward. It is not about the market value, Garrison. It is about the home. It is about our future. I tapped the folder. This is not a future. This is a liability. You cannot afford this. Declan slammed his hand on the table. The caviar dish rattled. We can afford it if you help us, he shouted. People turned to look. He lowered his voice, but the anger remained. You have millions sitting in your retirement accounts, Dad. I know you do. I have seen the statements on your desk. So you were snooping in my office, I asked. I was looking out for the family, Declan hissed. You are sitting on a pile of cash acting like a miser while your son is living in a rental apartment like a college student. You are 32 years old, Declan, I said. I was living in a rental when I was 32. I saved. I invested. I did not ask my father to buy me a mansion. This is different, Brittany interjected. Her voice was icy now. Times are different. We need a head start. And honestly, Garrison, you owe him. I owe him. I looked at her. I felt a cold laugh building in my chest. I paid for his college. I paid for his car. I paid for your wedding, Brittany, which cost $60,000 and lasted 6 hours. I owe him nothing. Declan looked at me with eyes that were suddenly wet. He was going to play the card I hated most. Mom would have wanted this, he whispered. I froze. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Catherine. My wife. She had been gone for 5 years. She was the soft one, the kind one, and they knew it. Do not, I warned. She told me Dad. Declan continued gaining confidence. On her deathbed. She told me, Declan, your father will take care of you. He will make sure you are happy. Is this taking care of me, denying me a home? You are twisting her words, I said. My voice was low, dangerous. Catherine wanted you to be happy. She did not want you to be a parasite. Brittany scoffed. A parasite? We are asking for a signature, Garrison. A signature that costs you nothing unless you think your own son is going to fail. Do you think he is a failure? Is that it? I looked at the contract again. I looked at the numbers. They were messy. They were hiding something. As a forensic auditor, I develop an instinct, a smell for rot. And this contract smelled like rot. Why was the broker fee so high? Why was the seller an LLC instead of a person? Why was Brittany so desperate for this specific house, but they were pushing me emotionally, trying to bypass my logic? You have saved enough, Declan said. You can't take it with you when you die, Dad. It is time to help your family. Just sign the paper. I looked at the caviar they had ordered. I looked at the champagne I had not touched. I looked at the son, who was wearing a suit. I bought him, demanding a house I would pay for. I raised my hand and signaled the waiter. Check, please, I said. What are you doing? Brittany asked. Her eyes narrowed. I am leaving, I said. The waiter arrived. He put the leather folder on the table. Split the check, I told the waiter. Sir, the waiter asked, confused. I pointed to my glass of sparkling water. I will pay for this. The gentleman and the lady will pay for the champagne, the caviar, and the service charge. Declan's jaw dropped. Dad, you can't be serious. This bill it's over $400. You ordered it, I said. You want to live like millionaires, start by paying for your own appetizers. I took out a $20 bill and placed it on the table. It covered my water and a generous tip for the waiter who had to deal with them. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I am not signing Declan. Not today. Not ever. And do not ever use your mother's name to extort money from me again. Brittany stood up too. She was shaking. Whether it was rage or fear, I could not tell yet. If you walk out that door, Garrison, you are making a mistake, she hissed. A very expensive mistake. I looked at her. I have faced cartel accountants and corrupt senators, Brittany. You are going to have to do better than vague threats. I turned my back on them. Dad, Declan shouted. Everyone in the restaurant stared. Dad, come back here. I walked out of Le Monde. The air outside was cold. It was a Chicago autumn, biting and sharp. I walked to the valet stand and handed them my ticket. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. It hurts. It always hurts to see your child fail the test of character. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they would sulk for a month and then come back to apologize when they needed rent money. I was wrong. I was pulling my keys out of my pocket when my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Brittany. It was a picture, an ultrasound image, grainy black and white, a fetus, and underneath a text message that made my blood run cold. You just refused to give your grandson a roof over his head. We are pregnant. If you do not sign that mortgage by 9 a.m. Monday, you will never see this child. You will die alone, Garrison, just like you deserve. I stared at the phone. A grandchild. Catherine had wanted a grandchild more than anything. I had wanted a grandchild, a legacy, someone to teach, someone to spoil. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, just a second, I wavered. Maybe I was being too hard. Maybe I should just sign. It is just money. I have the money. Then the auditor in me woke up. I looked at the image again. I zoomed in. The date stamp on the top corner of the ultrasound was blurry. Why was it blurry and the name on the patient file? It was cut off. I looked at the mortgage document in my mind. The high fees. The LLC seller. Now a surprise pregnancy announced 5 minutes after a financial rejection. I put the phone in my pocket. I did not reply. The valet brought my car. I got in. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But they were bringing emotions to a data fight. I drove home, the city lights blurring past me. I did not go to sleep. I went to my home office. I turned on my computer. I opened a new file. I named it Audit Declan and Brittany. If they were going to leverage a child against me, I was going to find out if that child even existed. And if they were trying to scam me, I was going to bury them under the weight of their own paper trail. Monday morning was going to be interesting. But I had no idea that by Tuesday I would be facing a $2 million lawsuit and the fight of my life. The valet ticket in my hand felt flimsy, a small piece of paper fluttering in the biting Chicago wind that whipped around the corner of the restaurant. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline of a confrontation I had spent a lifetime avoiding. I had faced down hostile boards of directors and aggressive federal prosecutors without blinking, but walking away from my own son left a hollow ache in my chest that no amount of logic could fill. I leaned against the rough brick that seal of Le Monde, taking deep breaths, trying to slow my heart rate. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to pour a scotch, sit in my leather armchair, and pretend this night had never happened. I wanted to believe that Declan was just stressed, that Brittany was just ambitious, and that underneath the greed, they still loved me. Then my phone vibrated in my breast pocket. It was a single long buzz, a text message. I almost ignored it. I knew who it was from. I expected an apology or perhaps more insults. Maybe a long paragraph from Declan explaining how I didn't understand the housing market. I reached into my coat, pulled out the device, and unlocked the screen. It was not text. It was an image. My breath hitched in my throat. The world around me, the honking taxis, the chatter of diners leaving the restaurant, the cold wind, it all faded into a dull hum. I stared at the screen, my eyes widening. It was an ultrasound, a grainy black and white triangle of life, a tiny bean-shaped shadow nestled in the dark void of a womb. A heartbeat I couldn't hear, but could almost feel radiating through the glass of my phone. Below the image, 3 bubbles of text appeared in rapid succession. You just walked out on your grandson. We found out yesterday. We wanted to surprise you with the house keys and the news together. Sign the papers by 9 tomorrow morning, or you will never meet him. You will never know his name. You will die a stranger to your own bloodline. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had to grip the valet stand to keep my knees from buckling. A grandson. The word echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my grief. For 5 years, since Catherine passed, the silence in my house had been deafening. We had always wanted a house full of noise and toys. Catherine had kept a cedar chest at the foot of our bed, filled with hand-knit blankets and soft yellow yarn, waiting for a generation that never came. She died holding my hand, her only regret that she never got to be a grandmother. And now here it was, the legacy, the future. A wave of nausea and longing crashed over me. Was I being a monster? Was I being a miserly old man clutching his coins while his family tried to build a life? $1.2 million was a lot of money, yes, but I had it. I could stroke a pen across a page and fix this. I could buy their love. I could buy access to that child. I could fulfill Catherine's last wish. The temptation was so strong, it was physical, a pulling sensation in my chest, urging me to run back inside the restaurant, to apologize, to sign whatever they put in front of me just to secure my place in that child's life. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I was ready to type, "I am coming back." But then the wind shifted. A cold gust hit my face, clearing the fog of emotion for a split second. And in that second, the auditor stepped forward. The part of me that had spent 40 years looking for the lie in the ledger took control. I looked at the image again. I didn't look with my heart this time. I looked with my eyes. I tapped the screen to zoom in. The image was low resolution, pixelated in a way that modern medical digital files usually are not. I squinted at the top corner of the scan, where the patient data is always printed. It was cropped. The name field was cut off. There was no Brittany Ford. There was no date. There was no hospital name. I scrolled down to the bottom right corner. There was a faint, blurry watermark. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a stock image code. My heart, which had been racing with hope, suddenly slowed into a cold, hard rhythm. I looked at the timestamp of the text message. It had been sent 3 minutes after I left the table. If they were so excited to tell me why, wait until I refused to pay? Why use the child as a bargaining chip in a mortgage negotiation? Why did the ultrasound look like it had been downloaded from a Google search? The auditor in me started asking questions that the father in me didn't want to hear. Brittany had been drinking champagne. I watched her down 2 glasses of Dom Perignon in 20 minutes. What kind of mother drinks heavy alcohol when she knows she's pregnant? The pieces didn't fit. The math didn't add up. A deep, freezing anger began to replace the sadness. They were not just asking for money. They were weaponizing my dead wife's dream. They were holding a non-existent child hostage to extort a signature. The valet pulled my 1967 Mustang up to the curb. The engine purred, a sound that usually brought me joy, but tonight it sounded like a growl. The attendant opened the door for me. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, looking at my pale face. I put the phone back in my pocket. I did not reply to the text. Silence is the loudest answer you can give to a blackmailer. "I am fine, son," I said, my voice steady and low. "I just realized I have some work to do tonight." I got into the car. I didn't look back at the restaurant. I didn't look up to see if they were watching from the window. I knew they were. They were expecting me to come running back, checkbook in hand, tears in my eyes. They expected the grieving widower. Instead, they were going to get the forensic auditor. I shifted the car into gear and pulled away into the traffic. If they wanted to play games with fake medical records and emotional terrorism, I was going to conduct the most thorough audit of their lives they had ever seen. I was going to find out if that baby was real, and if it wasn't, God help them, because I wouldn't. The house was dark when I unlocked the front door. The security system chirped a welcome, a mechanical sound that emphasized the silence waiting for me inside. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper, the scent of a museum where nothing ever changes and nothing new ever happens. I walked into the living room and didn't turn on the lights. The street lamps outside cast long, pale shadows across the Persian rug, pointing like accusing fingers toward the fireplace. Above the mantel hung the oil painting of Catherine. I poured myself a scotch, neat, my hand shaking just enough to clink the bottleneck against the crystal glass. I didn't drink it immediately. I just held it, letting the amber liquid catch the dim light, and stared up at her face. The artist had captured her eyes perfectly. Soft, forgiving. The kind of eyes that never saw a bad motive in anyone. She used to tell me I was too cynical, that I looked for the cracks in the foundation before I even admired the house. "They say we have a grandson, Cat," I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded raspy, foreign. "They say I am killing him by not signing a check." A physical pain radiated from my chest. It wasn't a heart attack. It was hope. Dangerous, blinding hope. For 5 years, this house had been a tomb. I had walked these halls hearing only the echo of my own footsteps. The thought of a child, a little boy running through the kitchen, knocking over vases, asking to see my calculator, it was a drug. It was the only thing I wanted more than my own next breath. If Catherine were here, she wouldn't be standing in the dark, drinking scotch. She would have been in the car 5 minutes ago. She would be driving to their apartment with knitting needles and a casserole dish. She would have signed that mortgage without reading a single clause. She would have let them rob her blind just to hold that baby for 5 minutes. And that is why I had to protect her even now. Especially now. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned, grounding me. I looked at her painted smile and felt the conflict tearing me apart. The father in me wanted to surrender. "Just sign the damn paper, Garrison. It is only money. You have millions. Let them have the house, let them win. If there is even a 1% chance that baby is real, isn't it worth the price? Isn't it worth being a fool just to be a grandfather? But then the other voice spoke up. The voice that had served me for 40 years. The auditor. The auditor didn't care about feelings. The auditor cared about facts, and the facts were screaming at me. I closed my eyes and replayed the dinner. I saw the waiter pouring the Dom Perignon. I saw the condensation on the glass. I saw Brittany's hand manicured and steady lifting the flute. She drank it. She didn't sip it. She didn't pretend to toast and put it down. She drank 2 full glasses of vintage champagne in less than 20 minutes. If she knew she was pregnant, if she had seen that ultrasound yesterday, like the text message said, why was she drinking alcohol? Was she reckless? Was she an alcoholic, or was she not pregnant at all? The text message flashed in my mind. You will die alone. That wasn't the plea of a desperate parent. That was the threat of a kidnapper. They weren't offering me a relationship with my grandson. They were selling me a ticket to see him. The price of admission was $1.2 million plus interest. They used your name, Cat, I said to the painting. My grip on the glass tightened until my knuckles turned white. They used your death to guilt me, and now they are using a life that might not exist to extort me. The longing for the child was still there, a dull ache, but the suspicion was sharpening into a blade. I couldn't act on hope. Hope is how good men go bankrupt. I needed proof. I needed verification. I finished the drink in one swallow and set the glass down on the coaster. The sharp click sounded like a gavel hitting a bench. If that baby is real, I will buy them the house. I will buy them the whole block. I will apologize on my knees. But if that baby is a phantom, if they invented a life just to steal my retirement, then they have declared war on the wrong man. I turned away from Catherine's soft eyes. I couldn't look at her for what I had to do next. I walked toward my study, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. I wasn't going to sleep. I had a file to open. I had a timeline to construct. Tonight I wasn't a grandfather. I was a forensic auditor, and I was about to conduct the most painful investigation of my life. The digital clock on my desk read 2:14 in the morning. My study was illuminated only by the blue glow of my monitors and the single amber bulb of the banker's lamp. On the screen, a spreadsheet was open, filled with the preliminary data I had scraped regarding the LLC selling the house. The cursor blinked a rhythmic pulse in the silence of my empty home. I was tired. My eyes burned, but my mind was racing at a speed that made sleep impossible. I was trying to connect the dots between a shell company in Delaware and my daughter-in-law's maiden name, but the numbers were blurry. Then the phone rang. It was a landline call. I keep a landline for emergencies and business contacts who know better than to call my cell after hours. Seeing the caller ID flash Declan's mobile number at this hour sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. It was the parent instinct, the one you never outgrow. A call at 2 a.m. usually means a hospital, a police station, or a morgue. I picked up the receiver before the second ring. Declan, I said. My voice was rough. Did you see him? His voice wasn't panicked. It was aggressive. Slurred slightly perhaps, or maybe just thick with exhausted rage. He wasn't calling to say he was hurt. He was calling to twist the knife. I saw the picture, Declan, I said, leaning back in my chair. I removed my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. And he demanded, You see your flesh and blood, a tiny heartbeat, and you go silent. You drive away. What kind of man does that? I am the kind of man who needs verification. I thought, but I didn't say it. I didn't want to tip my hand. Not yet. I am processing, Declan, I said calmly. It is a lot of information to drop on someone in a parking lot. You are not processing. You are calculating. You are counting pennies while I am trying to build a family. His anger was brittle. I could hear the cracks in it. I stayed silent. In an audit interview, silence is a tool. If you let the silence stretch, the guilty party will rush to fill it. They will talk to justify themselves, and in doing so, they will reveal their strategy. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then the shift happened. I heard a ragged intake of breath. A sniffle. The aggression evaporated, replaced by a sound that was far more dangerous, because it was designed to bypass my logic and strike directly at my heart. He started to cry. "Dad, I don't know what to do," he whispered. The sobbing sounded wet and desperate. "I am drowning here." The sudden vulnerability caught me off guard. This was the boy who used to scrape his knees and come running to me to fix it. This was the teenager who wrecked his first car and sat on the curb shaking until I put my hand on his shoulder. "Talk to me, son," I said, my voice softening against my better judgment. "You don't understand the pressure," he said. His voice was trembling. "Brittany. She comes from a different world. She expects things. She needs security. And now with the baby. Dad, I look at that ultrasound, and I feel like I can't breathe. I have to provide for them. I have to be the man you were. You gave Mom everything. You gave us this big house. You gave us safety. I just want to be like you." He was playing the flattery card, mixing it with his own inadequacy. It was a potent cocktail. He was validating my ego while soliciting my wallet. "You can provide, Declan," I said gently, "but you do it by living within your means, by building slowly." "We don't have time to build slowly," he cried out. "The baby is coming in 7 months. I can't bring a baby into a rental apartment with drafty windows and loud neighbors. I need this house. I need to know my family is safe. If I lose this house, Brittany, she is fragile right now. The hormones, the stress. If I fail her on this, I don't know if our marriage will survive." He paused, letting that sink in. He was telling me that my signature was the only thing holding his marriage together. He was making me responsible for his impending divorce if I refused. It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple, but hearing your son cry is a frequency that overrides the brain's defense mechanisms. Then he dropped the nuclear option. "I miss Mom," he choked out. I closed my eyes. The pain was instant, a physical blow to the chest. "I miss her too, Declan. Every day." "She made me promise," he said. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and conspiratorial. "The night before she went into the coma. We were alone in the hospital room. You were getting coffee. She grabbed my hand. She was so weak, Dad. She said, 'Declan, don't worry about the future. Your father will take care of you. He is a hard man, but he loves you. He will not let you struggle.'" I gripped the phone receiver so hard the plastic creaked. I remembered that night. I remembered leaving the room for 10 minutes to get a caffeine fix because I hadn't slept in 40 hours. I remembered coming back and finding them holding hands. "She told me to ask you for help when I really needed it," Declan continued. "She said, 'Your father saves for a rainy day.'" "Well, Dad, it is raining. It is pouring. I am your son. This is your grandson. Mom is watching us right now. What do you think she would say if she saw you sitting on millions of dollars while her grandbaby has no home? Do you think she would be proud of your auditing skills, or would she be ashamed? The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. I looked at the empty chair in the corner of my study where Catherine used to sit and read while I worked. I could almost see her there looking at me with those soft, disappointed eyes. Was he right? Was I being a miser? Was I letting my professional paranoia destroy my family? The image of the ultrasound flashed in my mind. A baby. Catherine's legacy. "Declan," I said, my voice wavering. I want to help." "You know I do." "Then just sign it, Dad. Please, for Mom, for the baby. Just sign the guarantor page. I will pay the mortgage, I promise. I just need your credit backing to get the keys. Send it over in the morning. Please. Let me tell Brittany you are the hero. Let me tell her that Grandpa fixed it. I reached for a pen. I pulled a notepad toward me. I was ready to write, I will do it. I was ready to surrender. The guilt was too heavy. The grief was too fresh. But as I reached for the pen, my elbow bumped the mouse. The computer screen brightened. The spreadsheet came back into focus. The numbers, the LLC, the blurred name on the ultrasound. The auditor in me refused to die. The auditor whispered that grief is the easiest vulnerability to exploit. The auditor reminded me that Declan had just transitioned from rage to tears to guilt in the span of 3 minutes. It was a performance. It was a sales pitch. I took a breath, a long, shaky breath. I can't sign the mortgage, Declan, I said. The sobbing on the other end stopped instantly. It was as if a switch had been flipped. What I cannot sign a document with those terms. It is financial suicide. But what? The voice was hard again. The sad little boy was gone. But if you are pregnant, really pregnant, I will help. I will pay for the best doctors. I will set up a college trust fund today. I will pay your rent for a year so you can save. I don't want a trust fund. I want the house. Why do you hate me? Why do you hate Brittany? I don't hate you. I am trying to protect you. Send me the full medical file, Declan. Send me the doctor's contact info. I want to verify the due date so I can set up the trust. Verify. You want to verify. You think we are lying. I didn't answer. You are a cold bastard. Garrison. Mom is turning in her grave. You want to audit your own grandchild? Fine. Audit this. If that paper isn't signed by Monday, you are dead to us. Do not call. Do not come to the hospital. You are nothing. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the receiver. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. I felt sick, physically sick. He had used Catherine. He had used her dying words. Words I couldn't verify, words that sounded suspiciously convenient to pry open my bank account. I sat in the silence for a long time. I looked at the spreadsheet. If they were telling the truth, I was a monster. But if they were lying, if they had scripted that entire call, then they were something much worse than monsters. They were thieves who had stolen the face of my son. I turned back to the computer. I typed in a new search query. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I had to find the truth about the house, the LLC, and the baby. And I had a terrible feeling that the answer was going to break my heart even more than the phone call did. The sun had barely risen over Lake Michigan, casting a cold, gray light into my living room, but I had not slept. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and the coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. I was still sitting at my desk, surrounded by printed schematics of shell companies and property tax records. The digital clock flickered to 7:14 in the morning. The deadline they had given me was 9. I was waiting for the phone to ring again for another threat, another plea. I did not expect the front door to nearly come off its hinges. The pounding was rhythmic and violent, a physical assault on the wood. It wasn't a knock. It was a demand. I stood up, my joints stiff from sitting all night, and walked to the foyer. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew exactly who was standing on the other side. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Declan pushed past me before I could even speak. He brought the cold autumn air in with him, along with the smell of stale sweat and manic energy. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like a man who had been cornered by a loan shark, not a son visiting his father. "Sign it," he barked, spinning around in the middle of the hallway. "Where is the contract? Sign it now." I closed the door calmly. I locked it. I turned to face him. "Good morning, Declan," I said. My voice was steady, a deliberate contrast to his hysteria. "I told you last night. The answer is no." He grabbed a vase from the entry table, a blue porcelain piece Catherine had bought in Paris, and hurled it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 jagged shards. "I do not have time for your games, Garrison," he screamed. His face was purple. "I have 1 hour. 1 hour before the bank opens and pulls the financing. 1 hour before the seller keeps my earnest money. Do you know how much I put down, do you?" I looked at the broken porcelain on the floor. I didn't flinch. "I assume you put down the standard amount," I said. "Nothing. Because you don't have any savings." "Declan." "I put down $100,000, he roared. I froze. The auditor in me did a double take. $100,000. Impossible. I knew his finances. I knew his rent payments were late. I knew Brittany's credit card debt was spiraling. There was no way he had 6 figures in liquid cash. 100,000, I repeated slowly. "Where did you get that kind of money, son? Did you borrow it? Are you in trouble with people you shouldn't know? I didn't borrow it. It was my money, an investment. And if you don't sign that guarantor form, the seller keeps it. It is non-refundable. You are going to burn $100,000 of my money just to prove a point." He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, vibrating with anxiety. "You are going to write me a check," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "If you won't sign the mortgage, you are going to reimburse me for the deposit. You owe me that. You made me lose this house." I stared at him. He was delusional. He was trying to invoice me for his own recklessness. "I am not writing you a check, Declan. And I am very curious. I want to know exactly where that money came from. You didn't have it last week. You didn't have it when you asked me for rent money 2 months ago. I made it happen," he yelled. "I made sacrifices. I did what I had to do to secure a future for my family." "What sacrifices?" I asked, stepping closer. My voice dropped an octave. "What did you do?" He stopped pacing. He looked at me, and for a split second I saw a flash of guilt cut through the rage. It was the look of a child who realizes he has broken something he can't fix. But then the arrogance returned, defensive and sharp. "I sold some assets," he spat out. "Unlike you, I don't hoard things. I use them." "You don't have assets, Declan," I said coldly. "You lease your car. You rent your apartment. You pawned your watch last year." "I had storage," he shouted, his defense crumbling into a confession he didn't realize he was making. "I cleared out the garage. I got a great price for it." "Okay." "A collector from Naperville paid cash. He didn't even haggle. That car was just sitting there gathering dust while your grandson needed a home." The world stopped. The air left the room, my garage. When I downsized to this house after Catherine died, it didn't have a garage large enough for my collection. I kept my daily driver here, but my pride and joy, the 19th Shelby Mustang, the car Catherine and I had restored together over 5 summers. The car we drove on our anniversary every year. I kept that in the detached garage at Declan's rental property. I paid him monthly for the space. I trusted him with the keys. "You sold the Mustang," I whispered. The color drained from his face. He realized too late that he had played his hand. He tried to backtrack to minimize it. It was just a car, Dad. It was old metal. You never drive it. You care more about that stupid car than you do about me. About the baby." Felt a coldness spread through my veins that was absolute and terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was the feeling of a door closing. A heavy steel door slamming shut between us. He hadn't just stolen property. He had sold a piece of his mother. He had sold the hours we spent sanding the rust. The laughter when the engine finally turned over, the memories of her hair blowing in the wind on Route 66. He had traded our history for a down payment on a lie. "You stole my car," I said. "I didn't steal it. I was storing it. It was practically mine anyway." You're old, you shouldn't be driving a stick shift. You forged the title, I said. The auditor was back in control. My voice was devoid of emotion. You couldn't have sold it without the title. It was in the glove box. You forged my signature. Declan stepped back, seeing the change in my eyes. He expected screaming. He expected tears. He didn't expect the icy calculation of a man preparing a prosecution. It was for the family, he screamed, his voice cracking. Why can't you understand that I needed the cash for the deposit? Get out, I said. Dad, please, get out of my house, Declan. Before I do something we will both regret. He looked at me, breathing hard. Then he sneered. Fine. Keep your house, keep your money, but you are going to pay me back for that deposit. You hear me? I am not losing that money because of you. He stormed out, leaving the front door wide open. I watched him run to his car, a leased BMW he couldn't afford, and peel away from the curb. I walked to the door and closed it. I looked at the shattered vase on the floor. Then I picked up the phone. I didn't call Declan. I didn't call Brittany. I dialed 911. Emergency, the operator said. I need to report a grand larceny. I said clearly. My vehicle was stolen. I know who did it, and I want to press charges. The drive to the rental property usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 12. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my sedan with such force that my knuckles turned white, but I felt nothing. I was operating on autopilot, a cold mechanical drive fueled by a singular need for verification. In my line of work, a confession is just hearsay until you see the empty vault. Declan had told me he sold the car, but a part of me, the part that remembered teaching him to ride a bike in that very driveway, prayed he was lying. I prayed he was just trying to hurt me with words. I pulled into the driveway of the bungalow I owned, the one I let him live in for a fraction of the market rent. The house was quiet. Brittany's car was gone. They were likely out spending the earnest money celebrating their victory over the stubborn old man. I walked past the house to the detached garage in the back. It was a simple structure, white siding, a single rolling door. I reached into my pocket for the key ring, but I stopped. The heavy padlock I had installed on the side door was gone. The metal hasp had been cut. The raw steel glinted in the morning light. I didn't need a key anymore. I pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness. The smell hit me first. Old oil rubber and the phantom scent of leather polish. It was the smell of my weekends for the past 30 years. But the visual was a physical blow to the gut. It was empty. Where the Shelby GT 500 should have been, there was only a rectangle of oil-stained concrete. The dust outlines of the tires were still visible, 4 empty circles mocking me. I walked to the center of the garage and stood in the oil stain. I looked at the workbench where Catherine used to sit reading paperback novels while I calibrated the carburetor. I remembered the day we finished it. I remembered the way she laughed when the engine roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that shook the tools on the wall. She named the car the Gray Ghost. It was our escape pod. It was the one thing we built just for us, not for Declan, not for the bank, but for us. And he had sold it. He had liquidated it like it was a stack of used lumber. I walked to the corner where I kept the maintenance logs. They were gone too. He had taken everything. He had erased the history to sell the asset. To sell a car like that to a collector, you need the title. The title was in the glove box signed by me as the owner, but the transfer line was blank. I kept it there for emergencies. To sell it, Declan would have had to forge my signature on the bill of sale. He would have had to look a notary in the eye and lie. He would have had to claim he was me or that he had my power of attorney. Fraud, forgery, grand larceny. These weren't just bad decisions. These were felonies. I took a deep breath. The air in the garage felt stale, dead. I didn't scream. I didn't kick the wall. I did what I always do when the numbers don't add up. I corrected the ledger. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I thought about the grandson he claimed to have. I thought about the family he said he was trying to protect. But then I looked at the empty space where my wife's joy used to be. He crossed the line. He didn't just steal a car. He stole the last tangible piece of his mother. I dialed 911. Emergency. What is the location of your emergency? The operator asked. I gave the address. My voice was flat, devoid of the tremor that had been there last night. I am reporting a theft, I said. A classic car. A 1967 Shelby Mustang. Estimated value $250,000. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Said. But the thief is known to me. Do you have a name for the suspect? I closed my eyes for a second. I saw Declan's face. I saw the entitlement. I saw the greed. Yes, I said. His name is Declan Ford. He is my son, and I want to press charges. The sight of my son in handcuffs should have broken my heart, but instead, it felt like a necessary correction to a ledger that had been unbalanced for far too long. I stood on the sidewalk in front of his rental bungalow, arms crossed against my chest, watching two uniformed officers guide Declan into the back of a squad car. The neighbors were watching from behind their curtains. Mrs. Gable across the street had her phone out, recording the downfall of the young man who thought he was too good to mow his own lawn. Declan wasn't screaming anymore. He looked small, pale, and terrified. He looked at me through the window of the cruiser, his eyes pleading for me to intervene, to tell them it was all a big mistake. I didn't look away, but I didn't move either. Actions have consequences, Declan. You sold my memories for cash. Now you pay the bill. I followed the cruiser to the precinct. The air inside the station smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent I knew well from my days auditing corporate fraud cases. I sat at a metal desk opposite Detective Miller, a tired man with a stack of paperwork that looked like a mountain range. So let me get this straight, Mr. Ford, the detective said, tapping his pen. Your son sold a $200,000 car without your permission and pocketed the cash. That is correct, I said. He forged my signature on the title. I want him charged with grand larceny and forgery. The detective nodded. It seems pretty open and shut. We found the bill of sale in his home office. The buyer confirmed he paid cash to Declan Ford. We are processing him now. I felt a grim satisfaction. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of a clean audit. The numbers finally balanced. Then the door to the squad room swung open. Brittany walked in. She wasn't crying. She wasn't running to bail out her husband. She was walking with the rhythmic click-clack of high heels that sounded like gunshots on the linoleum floor. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying a leather portfolio. She looked like a lawyer walking into a closing argument. She walked straight to Detective Miller's desk and ignored me completely. You are holding my husband illegally, she said. Her voice was calm, practiced. Ma'am, your husband is being charged with stealing a vehicle, the detective said, standing up. He didn't steal anything, she replied, opening her portfolio. He had authorization. She pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored paper and slid it across the desk. It wasn't a title. It was a legal document. I leaned forward. The header read, General Power of Attorney. I scanned the text. It granted Declan Ford full authority to manage, sell, and liquidate the asset sets of Garrison Ford in the event of incapacitation or for the purpose of asset management. It was dated 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I had undergone emergency bypass surgery. I had been under anesthesia for 6 hours. I had signed a medical proxy for Declan to make health decisions. I never signed a financial power of attorney. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was my name. The loops on the G were perfect. The slant was identical to mine. It was a masterpiece of forgery. This is a fake, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. I never signed this. Brittany smiled, a thin, razor-sharp curve of her lips. It is notarized Garrison. Look at the stamp. It is filed with the county. Declan was just exercising his legal right to manage your assets. He sold the car because he thought it was a bad investment for you to keep a depreciating asset rotting in a garage. He was doing his job as your attorney, in fact. The detective picked up the paper. He looked at the notary stamp. He looked at me. Then he let out a long sigh. Mr. Ford, if this document is valid, then he had the right to sell the car. It is not valid, I snapped. It is a forgery. The detective shook his head. That may be true, sir, but I can't prove that right now. If he has a notarized document giving him permission, this isn't a theft anymore. It is a dispute over the validity of a contract. He looked at the officer guarding the holding cell. Cut him loose. This is a civil matter. No. I slammed my hand on the desk. You are letting a thief walk out the front door. You can sue him in civil court, Mr. Ford, but I can't hold him on criminal charges with this piece of paper in play. Sorry. I watched as they uncuffed Declan. He rubbed his wrists, looking dazed. When he saw Brittany, he looked confused for a second, then relieved. He didn't know about the document. She had kept it as an insurance policy, a get-out-of-jail-free card she had forged years ago, just waiting for the right moment. They walked toward the exit. Declan wouldn't look at me, but Brittany stopped. She told Declan to wait by the door. She turned and walked back to me. She leaned in close. I could smell her expensive perfume, cloying and sweet, masking the rot underneath. She lowered her voice to a whisper, intimate and terrifying. You made a mistake calling the cops, Garrison. We were going to be nice. We were going to let you be a grandpa. But now I am going to take everything. The house, the pension, the reputation. By the time I am done with you, you will be sleeping in a shelter. She pulled back and winked. See you in court. I watched them walk out into the sunlight. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. I wasn't just fighting a greedy son anymore. I was fighting a professional predator. She had forged a document 2 years ago, anticipating my death or my weakness. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a long con. I looked at the empty doorway. You want a war, Brittany, I thought. Fine. I will give you a war. But you forgot one thing. An auditor doesn't just look at the document. He looks at the notary who stamped it. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. Prescott, I said. Clear your schedule. They just made it civil, and I am going to burn them to the ground. 3 days of silence is never a good sign in a hostile takeover. In the corporate world, silence means the enemy is massing their troops, liquidating assets to hire mercenaries, or drafting the paperwork that will end your career. In my family, silence just meant Brittany was writing the script. I spent those 72 hours waiting. I changed the locks on my house. I installed security cameras. I sat in my study organizing the evidence of the car theft, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I expected a smear campaign on social media. I expected slashed tires. I did not expect a knock on the door at 8 in the morning from a man in a windbreaker holding a thick manila envelope. Are you Garrison Ford? He asked. He looked bored. To him, I was just another stop on his route, another life about to be ruined before his lunch break. I am, I said. You have been served, he mumbled, thrusting the package into my chest. He turned and walked away before I could even grip the paper. I closed the door and walked to the kitchen island. The envelope was heavy. It felt like a brick. I opened it, my hands steady, my mind already engaging the cold, analytical filter I used to survive 40 years of auditing fraud. I pulled out the summons. Superior Court of Cook County. Plaintiffs Declan Ford and Brittany Ford. Defendant Garrison Ford. I scanned the cover page. It was a civil lawsuit. I turned to the complaint. Paragraph 1 hit me like a physical slap. Count 1, breach of verbal contract. Promissory estoppel. I read the details and my breath caught in my throat. It was a lie so audacious, so specifically cruel, that I had to read it twice to believe my own eyes. The complaint alleged that 5 years ago, on the day of Catherine's funeral, while standing at her graveside, I had entered into a verbal binding contract with Declan. It claimed I had promised him in front of witnesses that I would purchase a home for him and his future wife upon their request as part of his inheritance distribution. They were weaponizing my grief. They were taking the worst day of my life, the day I lowered my wife into the ground, and turning it into a business transaction. I continued reading. Count 2, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The complaint stated that by maliciously withholding the promised funds, I had caused Brittany severe psychological trauma, endangering her pregnancy and causing her undue suffering. They claimed I was using my wealth to financially abuse them. I flipped to the damages section. The number jumped off the page. Compensatory damages. $1.2 million for the loss of the property. Punitive damages. $800,000 for emotional suffering. $2 million. They weren't just suing me for the house anymore. They were suing me for my retirement. They were suing me for the money I had made working 80-hour weeks while they slept. I looked at the evidentiary list attached to the back. Witness affidavit Sarah Miller. I knew Sarah Miller. She was Brittany's college roommate. She hadn't even been at the funeral. I remembered the funeral perfectly. It was raining. It was just me and Declan at the grave after the service. No one else was close enough to hear a whisper, let alone a contract negotiation. They had manufactured a witness. They had manufactured a promise. I put the paperwork down on the granite counter. The house was silent, but my head was screaming. This was the nuclear option. This was Brittany's endgame. She knew she couldn't get the money through guilt, so she was going to get it through the courts. She was betting that I would be too ashamed to fight a public battle. She was betting that I would settle to keep my name out of the public record, to keep my son from testifying against me. She was betting on the father. But the father was gone. The man standing in the kitchen was the auditor. And an auditor knows that when someone files a fraudulent claim, they leave a paper trail. $2 million. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Declan. I didn't call Brittany. There was nothing left to say to them. I dialed the number for Prescott, the nastiest, most expensive litigator in Chicago. Prescott, I said when he answered. It is Garrison. I just got served. They want $2 million. Silence on the other end. Then the sound of a pen clicking. Bring it in, Garrison, Prescott said. And bring your checkbook. We are going to have some fun. I hung up. I looked at the lawsuit one last time. You want to talk about promises, Declan, I thought. I promised your mother I would take care of you. And the best way to take care of you right now is to make sure you never see a dime of this money. I grabbed my coat. The court date was set. The audit was about to begin. Prescott's office was on the 45th floor, a glass fortress overlooking the city I had spent a lifetime cleaning up. He didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask about my health. He sat behind a desk that cost more than my first car and slid the lawsuit across the polished wood like it was a loaded weapon. This is not a nuisance suit, Garrison, he said. His voice was gravel and scotch. This is a landmine. I looked at him. I pay Prescott $500 an hour because he doesn't sugarcoat the truth. He is a shark in a three-piece suit, and right now he smelled blood in the water. My blood. Explain, I said. It is a lie. The contract never happened. It does not matter if it happened, Prescott said, leaning forward. It matters that they have a sworn affidavit from a witness. In the state of Illinois, promissory estoppel is a real threat. If a jury believes you made a promise and they believe your son relied on that promise to his financial detriment, Like putting down a non-refundable deposit, you are liable. He tapped the document. And juries hate rich fathers who stiff their crying sons. They will see a grieving boy and a pregnant wife. They will see you, a cold forensic auditor, sitting on millions. They will not look at the facts. They will look at the optics. And the optics are ugly. So what is your advice? I asked. Write a check, Prescott said. Give them $50,000. Call it a nuisance fee. Make them sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away. If we fight this, it will take 2 years. It will cost you $200,000 in legal fees alone. And there is a 30% chance we lose everything. I sat in the leather chair and looked out at the skyline. $50,000. It was the logical move. It was the safe move. It was the move a tired old man would make to protect his peace. But I wasn't tired. I was insulted. They didn't just sue me for money, Prescott, I said quietly. They sued me for my character. They dragged my wife's funeral into a courtroom. If I settle, I am admitting that their lie has value. I am admitting that my integrity has a price tag. Prescott sighed. Principles are expensive, Garrison. Do you really want to spend your retirement deposing your own son? I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the tiny cars moving like ants below. I saw the patterns in the traffic. I saw the flow. That is what I do. I see the patterns that others miss. I don't want to depose him, I said. I want to destroy him. Prescott went silent. He swiveled his chair to look at me. I am not going to play defense, Prescott. I am not going to stand there and say I didn't do it. I am going to prove that this entire lawsuit is the tip of a criminal iceberg. What do you mean? He asked. I mean that people who forge titles and fake pregnancies don't stop there, I said, turning back to him. They are desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. They leave paper trails. They hide assets. They wash money. I walked back to the desk and placed my hands on the leather. I want you to file a countersuit, I said. Fraud, abuse of process, conversion of assets. And I want full discovery. I want their bank statements for the last 5 years. I want their tax returns. I want the records of that LLC selling the house. I want the medical records for that pregnancy. You are going to audit your son, Prescott? Asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. No, I said. I am going to audit his life. I am going to strip mine their finances until I find the rot. And when I find it, I am not just going to win this case. I am going to send them to prison. Prescott picked up his pen. The click sounded like the cocking of a gun. We are going to need a forensic accountant, he said. I buttoned my jacket. You already have the best one in the city, I said. Just get me the subpoenas. I will do the rest. My study had become a war room. Stacks of paper covered every inch of the mahogany desk, a fortress of white pulp and black ink, separating me from the rest of the world. The only light came from the dual monitors of my computer, casting a spectral blue glow that made the room feel like the inside of a submarine. It was 3 a.m. on a Thursday. Most men my age were sleeping, dreaming of golf courses or their grandchildren. I was awake hunting. I had spent 40 years tracking money through the labyrinthine sewers of corporate finance. I had found millions hidden in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I had traced embezzled pension funds through shell companies in Panama. Compared to those complex webs of deceit, Declan and Brittany's financial life should have been a coloring book. But looking at the initial data, I realized I had underestimated them. Or rather, I had underestimated Brittany. I started with the house. 24 Maplewood Drive, North Shore, the crown jewel of their demands. The property they claimed was essential for the safety of my non-existent grandson. I logged into the Cook County Recorder of Deeds database. It is a public record accessible to anyone who knows how to navigate the archaic interface, but most people never look. They see a house, they see a price tag, they assume it is real. An auditor assumes everything is a lie until the numbers confess. I pulled the transaction history for the property. The most recent listing price was indeed $1.2 million. That was the number on the mortgage document they had tried to force me to sign. But when I looked at the sales history, the red flag didn't just wave, it screamed. The property had been sold exactly 6 months ago. The purchase price was $550,000. I leaned back in my chair taking a sip of cold coffee. In 6 months, the value of a suburban home does not double. It does not jump by $650,000 unless you discover oil in the backyard or the previous owner was hiding gold bars in the walls. This wasn't a market fluctuation. This was a flip, but it was a lazy flip. I pulled the tax assessment. No permits had been pulled for major renovations. No new roof, no addition, no pool. They hadn't improved the asset. They had simply inflated the price tag. So who bought it 6 months ago for $500,000? I looked at the grantee on the deed. It wasn't a person. It was an entity. BP Ventures LLC, a limited liability company. The favorite tool of money launderers and tax evaders everywhere. An LLC hides the owner. It creates a veil of corporate anonymity. If you sue BP Ventures, you are suing a piece of paper, not a person. But every LLC has a birth certificate. It has articles of organization filed with the Secretary of State. I opened a new tab. I went to the Illinois Secretary of State business search. I typed in BP Ventures LLC. The search wheel spun for a few seconds. I held my breath. This was the moment of the catch. This was the moment the fisherman feels the tug on the line. The results popped up. Status active. Filing date 6 months and 2 weeks ago. Registered agent, the Corporation Trust Company. A dead end. A professional registered agent service is a paid shield. They accept the mail, so the real owner doesn't have to put their address on public forms. It is perfectly legal and perfectly frustrating. But amateur fraudsters always make a mistake. They get lazy. They try to save a few dollars on legal fees. They sign a document they shouldn't. I dug deeper. I requested the annual report. Nothing yet. It was too new. I requested the initial filing document image. It cost me $5. I paid it without blinking. The PDF downloaded. I zoomed in on the bottom of the page past the boilerplate legal jargon about purpose and duration. I looked for the organizer's signature. Usually this is a lawyer. But sometimes, just sometimes, the principal signs it themselves because they think no one is watching. The signature was scrawled in blue ink. It was messy. It was rushed. Caleb Pierce. I stared at the name. It felt familiar, like a song I had heard once on the radio years ago. Pierce. Brittany's maiden name was Pierce. I opened a new window and searched for Caleb Pierce. I found his LinkedIn profile in 30 seconds. Caleb Pierce. Wealth management consultant. Based in Chicago. I clicked on his profile picture. He was young, maybe 30. He had the same sharp chin as Brittany. The same hungry eyes. I went to his Facebook page. It was wide open. Careless. I scrolled back 6 months. There was a photo of him and Brittany holding champagne flutes at a bar. The caption read, "Big moves coming, keeping it in the family." I sat back, the realization washing over me like ice water. It was a closed loop. The scheme was elegant in its cruelty. Caleb, the brother, buys a distressed property for $550,000 using a hard money loan, or perhaps pooled family cash. He does nothing to it. Maybe a coat of paint. Then Brittany finds a buyer who is desperate, emotional, and backed by a wealthy, guilt-ridden father. That buyer was Declan. They set the price at $1.2 million. If I had signed that mortgage, the bank would have cut a check for $1.2 million to the seller, BP Ventures LLC. Caleb would pay off his initial $550,000 investment. The remaining $650,000, that was pure profit. That money would go into the LLC's bank account, and from there, it would flow quietly into Caleb's pockets and undoubtedly into Brittany's pockets. They weren't asking me to buy them a home. They were asking me to donate $600,000 to Brittany's family, and they were using the house as the laundry machine to wash the transaction. They were stealing my retirement, laundering it through a mortgage, and handing me a bill for the interest. And Declan? Was he in on it, or was he the mark? I looked at the numbers again. If Declan defaulted on the loan, which he would, because he couldn't afford the payments on $1 million home, the bank would foreclose. I, the guarantor, would be on the hook for the deficiency. I would lose my own house to pay for theirs. Meanwhile, Caleb and Brittany would be $500,000 richer, safe behind the corporate veil of the LLC. I felt a surge of professional admiration mixed with personal disgust. It was a classic over-invoicing scheme usually seen in construction contracts or government procurement fraud. Seeing it applied to a family home purchase was sickening. But I needed more. A signature on an LLC formation document was a smoking gun, but I wanted the bullet. I wanted to prove the intent. I went back to the tax records. I looked at the property taxes for 124 Maplewood Drive. The bill was mailed to a P.O. box in downtown Chicago. I ran a search on that P.O. box. It was listed as the mailing address for 3 other businesses: Pierce Consulting, Brittany Ford Styling, Caleb Pierce Enterprises. Bingo. They were using the same mailbox. They were operating out of the same pocket. I printed every document: the deed, the LLC filing, the LinkedIn profile, the tax bill, the P.O. box registration. The printer hummed a rhythmic, comforting sound. Each page that slid into the tray was a nail in their coffin. This wasn't hearsay. This wasn't a verbal contract at a funeral. This was hard, empirical data. This was fraud. I picked up the stack of warm paper. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. They wanted to sue me for $2 million. They wanted to drag me into court and paint me as a villain. I was going to walk into that courtroom and paint them as felons. I looked at the clock. 4:45 a.m. I had been working for 6 hours. My back ached, but my mind was crystal clear. I had the real estate fraud. That was the first pillar of their destruction. Now I needed the second pillar. I needed the baby. If they were willing to fake a real estate transaction to steal from me, what else were they willing to fake? The ultrasound I had seen was blurry. The text message was aggressive. I turned back to the computer. I wasn't done. The real estate investigation was just the warm-up. Now I was going to investigate the pregnancy. And if my suspicions were correct, I was about to uncover a lie so dark it would make the mortgage fraud look like a parking ticket. I opened a new browser window. I typed in the name of the only private investigator I trusted, a man who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle was using a fake ID. It was time to get physical surveillance. It was time to find out if Brittany Ford was actually visiting obstetricians or if she was just visiting the bank. Surveillance is an investment in truth. It is expensive, it is time-consuming, and it often reveals things you wish you had not seen. But in a high-stakes audit, you do not rely on the word of the auditee. You put boots on the ground. I hired Vance, a private investigator who used to work for the Treasury Department tracking money launderers. He was not cheap, but he was invisible. I gave him one target: Brittany Ford. For 5 days, Vance became Brittany's shadow. While I was dissecting the shell companies of her brother, Vance was dissecting her daily life. He sent me updates every 6 hours. The reports were a catalog of contradictions. Brittany claimed in her lawsuit that my refusal to pay for the house had caused her extreme emotional distress, endangering her high-risk pregnancy. She claimed she was bedridden with anxiety. She claimed she was on the verge of a miscarriage due to my cruelty. Vance's photos told a different story. Day 1. Brittany was not bedridden. She was at a spin class in the Gold Coast. The photos showed her exiting the gym, sweating, laughing with a friend, and lighting a slim vaporizer pen the moment she hit the sidewalk. Nicotine. Not exactly a prenatal vitamin. Day 2. Lunch at a sushi bar. Vance got a receipt from the trash. Sashimi, raw fish, sake. 3 carafes split between 2 people. Day 3 was the most interesting. Vance tracked her to a medical complex on the outskirts of the city. This was it, I thought. The obstetrician. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was just a reckless mother, but a mother nonetheless. Vance followed her inside. He couldn't go into the exam room, obviously, but he sat in the lobby. He watched the directory. The building housed an OB/GYN clinic on the 3rd floor. Brittany got on the elevator. But Vance is thorough. He didn't just sit there. He walked up the stairs. He watched the elevator indicators. The car didn't stop on the 3rd floor. It went to the 5th. The 5th floor was a cosmetic dermatology center. Botox, fillers, laser treatments. She wasn't checking on the baby. She was getting her forehead smoothed for the trial. When she came out an hour later, she made a phone call. Vance was close enough to record it with a directional microphone. He sent me the audio file. I played it in my office, the sound of her voice filling the room like a toxic gas. "Hey, babe," she said. The tone was weak, breathless. "Yeah, I just left the doctor. He said the baby's heart rate is a little irregular. It is the stress, Declan. It is your father. I am terrified. I just need to go home and lie down." She hung up, put on her sunglasses, and walked into a high-end boutique to buy shoes. I listened to the recording 3 times. The manipulation was masterful. She was feeding Declan's panic, keeping him in a state of high alert, so he would stay angry at me. She was using a non-existent medical crisis to control her husband. But surveillance photos are circumstantial. A jury might look at a photo of her drinking sake and say she is just irresponsible. I needed hard data. I needed the medical file. This is where their greed became their undoing. In their lawsuit, they had sued me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, causing physical harm. By claiming physical harm, by claiming the pregnancy was in danger, they had legally put her medical condition at issue. In the eyes of the court, she had waived her doctor-patient confidentiality regarding the pregnancy. I called Prescott. "File a motion for discovery," I said. "I want her full medical history. I want the records from her OB/GYN. I want the ultrasound originals. And I want an independent medical examination." "They will fight it," Prescott warned. "They will say it is invasive." "Let them fight," I said. "If they refuse, the judge throws out the emotional distress claim. If they agree, we see the truth. It is a trap, Prescott. Spring it." They fought it for 24 hours. Their lawyer sent a furious letter claiming I was harassing a pregnant woman. But the law is the law. If you want $2 million for medical damages, you have to prove the damages exist. The judge granted our motion. They had 48 hours to produce the records. The file arrived on a Tuesday evening via secure courier. It was a digital drive. I plugged it into my computer. I opened the folder labeled Medical History, B. Ford. There were hundreds of pages. Routine checkups, allergies, a broken arm in college. I scrolled through the noise looking for the signal. I was looking for the prenatal records. There were none. No blood tests, no hormone panels, no ultrasound reports. I frowned. Had they withheld them? That would be contempt of court. Then I saw a file from a clinic I didn't recognize. North Star Women's Health, dated 3 years ago. I opened it. It was a surgical report. Patient Brittany Pierce Ford. Procedure bilateral salpingectomy. Date August 14, 2020. Surgeon Dr. Aris Thorne. I froze. I knew what that term meant, but I looked it up just to be absolutely certain. Bilateral salpingectomy. The surgical removal of both fallopian tubes. It wasn't a tubal ligation. It wasn't having her tubes tied. It was removal. It was permanent. It was irreversible. Brittany Ford could not get pregnant naturally. It was biologically impossible. She had sterilized herself 3 years ago, a year before she even married Declan. I sat back in my chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. The room seemed to tilt. The baby was a lie. The ultrasound was a forgery. The morning sickness, the cravings, the tears about the nursery. It was all theater. And then a second realization hit me, one that was even more devastating than the first. Declan didn't know. I looked at the consent forms for the surgery. Brittany's signature was there. There was no spousal consent line because they weren't married yet. She had done this alone. She had married a man who talked constantly about wanting a big family, all while knowing she had made sure that would never happen. She wasn't just conning me. She was conning him. She was using a fake pregnancy to extract millions from his father. And when the money came through, what was her plan? A fake miscarriage, a tragic accident. She would blame the stress. She would blame me. She would take the money, mourn the imaginary child, and keep Declan trapped in a web of shared grief forever. It was the cruelest long con I had ever seen. I looked at the ultrasound image she had texted me that first night. I opened it side by side with the surgical report. I ran a metadata analysis on the ultrasound image file they had submitted in Discovery. It was supposed to be a medical record. The metadata showed the software used to create it. Adobe Photoshop CS6. The creation date was the morning of the dinner at Le Monde. She had made it on her laptop while Declan was probably picking out his tie. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my gut. It was heavier than the anger I felt about the car. It was heavier than the anger about the house. This was pure evil. She was gaslighting my son into believing he was a father, feeding on his hope and his fear just to get access to my bank account. I picked up the phone. I called Prescott. It was late, but he answered. "I have the records," I said. "And she is sterile, Prescott. She had her tubes removed 3 years ago. There is no baby." The silence on the line was profound. Even a shark like Prescott was stunned. "My God," he whispered. That is fraud on a massive level." "It is perjury," I said. "It is extortion." And Prescott, "Yes, Declan doesn't know." "How do you know?" "Because if he knew, he wouldn't be suing me for emotional distress over a baby that doesn't exist. He is the Mark Prescott. He is the victim. He is just the weapon she is using to point at me." "What do you want to do? Do you want to send this to their lawyer now?" "Force a dismissal." "No," I said. The auditor in me was in full command now. If I sent it now, they would withdraw the suit. They would scurry away into the dark. Brittany would spin a lie to Declan. She would say the records were wrong, or that it was a miracle she got pregnant, and then she would fake a miscarriage tomorrow to cover her tracks. She would escape. I didn't want her to escape. "We go to trial," I said. "Garrison, we have the smoking gun. We can end this tomorrow." "No, we go to court. I want her on the stand. I want her under oath. I want her to look the judge in the eye and lie about that baby one more time. And then I want to destroy her. I want Declan to see it, Prescott. I want him to see the paperwork. I want him to watch her face when the lie collapses. It is the only way to save him." Prescott paused. "It is risky." "It is necessary," I said. "Prepare the exhibits. We are not settling. We are going for the throat." I hung up the phone. I looked at the surgical report one last time. Bilateral salpingectomy. It was a cold clinical term, but to me it looked like ammunition. I printed it out. I placed it in the folder next to the real estate fraud evidence. The audit was complete. The findings were conclusive. Now it was time to present the report. And the presentation was going to be in Superior Court Department 402, in front of a judge who had zero tolerance for liars. I turned off the monitor. For the first time in weeks, I was going to sleep. I needed my rest. I had a family to dismantle. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and cheap cologne, the distinct scent of desperation that I had smelled in 100 corporate boardrooms right before a hostile takeover. But this was not a boardroom. This was Superior Court Department 402, and I was not the auditor. I was the defendant. I sat at the mahogany table, my hands folded perfectly on top of the fake wood grain, watching the theater production my family had orchestrated. They had hired Miles Sterling, a personal injury lawyer, who advertised on the sides of city buses. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. He didn't care about the truth. He cared about the settlement. He paced in front of the jury box like a tiger stalking a herd of gazelles, making eye contact with every juror, selling them a story of a broken heart and a cruel father. Sterling stopped in front of the jury and pointed a finger at me. It was a theatrical gesture, rehearsed and precise. He didn't look at me. He looked at the 12 strangers who would decide my fate. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice dropping to a somber baritone. You are looking at a man who has spent his entire life valuing numbers over people. Garrison Ford is a man of wealth, a man of status, a man who has millions of dollars sitting in cold, dark accounts while his only son struggles to put food on the table. But we are not here to put Mr. Ford on trial for being rich. Being rich is not a crime. We are here because he made a promise, a sacred promise. He walked over to the plaintiff's table where Declan and Brittany sat. Brittany was wearing a modest gray dress, looking down at her hands, playing the role of the devoted, suffering wife. Declan looked pale, his shoulders slumped, a portrait of filial defeat. On the day he buried his wife, Sterling continued, his voice cracking. With manufactured emotion, Garrison Ford looked his grieving son in the eye. He stood over the fresh earth of Catherine Ford's grave, and he made a contract. Not a contract of paper and ink, but a contract of blood and honor. He promised to buy his son a home. He promised to secure his future. And based on that promise, Declan Ford built a life. He invested his savings. He prepared a nursery. He trusted his father. Sterling spun around to face me. And what did Garrison Ford do when it came time to honor that promise? Did he write the check? Did he hug his son? No. He laughed. He walked out of a restaurant. He called the police on his own child over a misunderstanding about a car. He broke the contract, and in doing so, he broke this family. I watched Sterling's performance with professional detachment. It was good. It was emotional. It bypassed logic and went straight for the gut. I saw the jurors nodding. A woman in the back row looked at me with open disgust. They didn't see a forensic auditor protecting his assets from fraud. They saw Ebenezer Scrooge. Sterling called his first witness, Declan Ford. Declan walked to the stand. He didn't look at me. He looked at Brittany, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. He swore to tell the truth, a ritual that meant nothing to him anymore. Mr. Ford, Sterling asked softly, "Take us back to that day, the day of the funeral." Declan took a deep breath. He gripped the railing of the witness box. His hands were shaking. I wondered if the shaking was real, a side effect of the lies he was about to tell, or if it was just another part of the script Brittany had written for him. "It was raining," Declan said. His voice was quiet. The jury leaned in to hear him. Everyone had left the cemetery. It was just me and Dad. We were standing by Mom's casket. I was a mess. I didn't know how I was going to go on without her. He paused to wipe an eye. No tears yet, but they were coming. "And what did your father say to you?" Sterling prompted. "He put his hand on my shoulder," Declan said. He looked me in the eye. He said, "Son, your mother wanted you to be happy. She wanted you to be safe. When you find the right house, when you are ready to settle down, I will buy it for you. It is your inheritance. It is what she would have wanted." I sat perfectly still. It was a lie. a pure, unadulterated fabrication. At the funeral, I had told him to be strong. I had told him we would get through it. I never mentioned a house. I never mentioned money. But as I watched him, I realized he believed it. He had told himself this lie so many times over the last 5 years, fed by Brittany's whispers, that it had become his truth. He had rewritten his memory to justify his greed. "Did you believe him?" Sterling asked. "Of course I believed him," Declan said, his voice rising. "He is my father. He is the only parent I have left. Why would he lie to me at my mother's funeral?" "And because of that promise," Sterling said, walking closer to the stand. "What did you do?" "I put down a deposit," Declan said. "A non-refundable deposit. $100,000. Every dime I had. I borrowed from friends. I sold things. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to show him I was ready. He sold things. He meant my car. He was framing his felony as a sacrifice. And when you presented him with the opportunity to fulfill his promise," Sterling asked, his voice hardening, "what did he do?" "He destroyed me," Declan choked out. The tears finally came. Real, ugly tears. He looked at me then. For the first time, he looked me in the eyes. And I saw the hate. I saw the resentment of a son who felt entitled to a life he hadn't earned. He looked at the paperwork for the house and he sneered. He told me I wasn't worth it. He told me I was a parasite. He left me there with the bill. And then he threatened us. He threatened Brittany. The jury gasped. Softly, but I heard it. He knew Brittany was pregnant. Declan sobbed. He knew the stress could hurt the baby. But he didn't care. He said he would spend every penny he had on lawyers before he gave a dime to his grandson. Sterling let the silence hang in the room. He let the jury look at the crying man, and then look at the stone-faced father. "No further questions," Sterling said softly. Declan stayed in the chair, wiping his face with a tissue. He looked broken. He looked like the victim of a tragedy. It was a masterclass in manipulation. If I were on that jury, I would have hated me too. I would have awarded him the $2 million just to teach the old man a lesson. But courtrooms are not about feelings. They are about facts. And while Declan was crying over a script, my lawyer Prescott was standing up. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked like a butcher picking up a cleaver. He walked toward the witness stand. He didn't offer Declan a tissue. He offered him a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Ford," Prescott said, his voice booming through the quiet room. "You say your father promised to buy you a house. Any house or a specific house?" "A house." Declan sniffled. "A home for the family. And this deposit you mentioned." Prescott continued, picking up a piece of paper from our defense table. "The $100,000. You said you used your own money?" "Yes," Declan said, sitting up straighter. "My savings." "Interesting," Prescott said. "Because we have your bank records here." I watched Declan's eyes dart to the side. He looked at Brittany. She didn't move. She stared straight ahead, her face a mask of porcelain calm. She knew what was coming. She just hoped Declan could weather the storm. But Declan wasn't built for storms, and the hurricane was just beginning. Prescott picked up a single sheet of paper from the stack I had spent nights compiling. He held it by the corner as if it were contaminated. He didn't look at Declan. He looked at the jury. "Mr. Ford," Prescott said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "You testified that you used your life savings for the deposit. $100,000. Is that correct?" "Yes," Declan said. He shifted in the seat. He was still playing the victim, but his eyes were darting around the room looking for an exit that didn't exist. "And where did those savings come from?" Prescott asked. "Did you save them from your salary?" I invested well," Declan stammered. "Crypto. Stocks." "Interesting," Prescott said. He walked back to the defense table and picked up another document. "This is Exhibit D. It is a forensic analysis of your bank accounts for the last 5 years. It shows that your average monthly balance was never higher than $3,000. It shows overdraft fees in 23 of the last 60 months. Declan's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But let's put that aside for a moment. Prescott continued, waving a hand dismissively. Let's talk about the house. The house my client supposedly promised to buy. 124 Maplewood Drive. It is a beautiful house, Declan whispered. It is, Prescott agreed. And expensive. $1.2 million. Tell me, Mr. Ford, do you know who the seller is? It is an LLC, Declan said. BP Ventures. And do you know who owns BP Ventures? Declan shook his head. No. Just some investors. Prescott turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to introduce Defense Exhibit E. These are the articles of organization for BP Ventures LLC filed with the Secretary of State 6 months ago. He handed a copy to the judge, a copy to Sterling, and then he walked to the witness stand and placed the document in front of Declan. Look at the bottom of the page, Mr. Ford. Who signed as the organizer? Declan looked down. He squinted. Then he blinked once, twice. His confusion was genuine. Caleb Pierce, he read aloud. And who is Caleb Pierce? Prescott asked. He is Brittany's brother. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Sterling jumped up. Objection, relevance. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. This goes to the heart of the damages claim. Continue, Mr. Prescott. Prescott smiled. It was a shark's smile. So Brittany's brother bought the house 6 months ago. Do you know how much he paid for it, Mr. Ford? No, Declan said. His voice was barely a whisper. He looked at Brittany. She was staring straight ahead, her knuckles white as she gripped the table. He paid $550,000, Prescott said. And 6 months later, he is selling it to you for $1.2 million. That is a profit of $650,000. Tell me, Mr. Ford, was your wife aware that her brother was price gouging you? Declan looked at Brittany. Brittany, he said. Did you know? She didn't answer. She didn't look at him. And that $100,000 deposit? Prescott continued, relentless. The money you stole. Excuse me, the money you liquidated from your father's assets. Who did you write that check to? To the title company, Declan said. No, you didn't, Prescott said. He held up a copy of a canceled check. You wrote it directly to BP Ventures LLC. You wrote a personal check to your brother-in-law. And where is that money now? I don't know. We do, Prescott said. He turned to the jury. We traced the funds. Within 24 hours of deposit, $50,000 was transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. And the other $50,000, it was transferred to a personal account at Chase Bank. Prescott paused for effect. The account belongs to Brittany Ford. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but the noise didn't stop. Declan stood up in the witness box. Brittany, he shouted. You took the money, you took the deposit. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, dead. Sit down, Declan, she hissed. You are embarrassing me. You stole my money, Declan screamed. I sold his car for that money. I went to jail. For that money, order, the judge bellowed. Order in this court. Declan collapsed back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. The victim narrative was gone. The grieving son was gone. Now there was just a fool who had been played by his own wife. Prescott waited for the room to quiet down. He walked back to our table and looked at me. I nodded. It was time for the final blow. Mr. Ford, Prescott said softly. We have established that the house was a scam. We have established that your wife and her brother were laundering your father's money. But there is one more thing. The reason for all of this. The emotional distress. The baby. Declan looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed with desperation. "The baby is real," he pleaded. "The baby is the only thing that matters. Please, don't take that away from me." Prescott didn't say anything. He just picked up a sealed envelope from the table. "Your Honor," he said, "we have one final piece of evidence, a medical report obtained via subpoena regarding Mrs. Ford's alleged high-risk pregnancy." Sterling stood up. "Objection, this is highly prejudicial. It violates privacy. It goes to the claim of physical damages," Prescott shot back. "They sued for emotional distress endangering a fetus. We have a right to know if the fetus exists." The judge looked at Sterling. Then he looked at the envelope. "I will allow it," the judge said. Prescott opened the envelope. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. He didn't hand it to Declan. He handed it to the judge first. The judge read it. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at Brittany Ford with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. Then he looked at Declan. "You may proceed, Mr. Prescott," the judge said quietly. Prescott walked to the witness stand. He placed the document gently in front of Declan. "Mr. Ford," Prescott said, "please read the highlighted section." Declan looked down. He read. He stopped. He read it again. Bilateral. Salpingectomy, he struggled with the word. "It means the surgical removal of both fallopian tubes," Prescott said. "It means sterilization. It says here that the procedure was performed 3 years ago." Declan stared at the paper. He shook his head. "No. No, that's wrong. We have an ultrasound." She showed me the ultrasound. He looked at Brittany. "Brittany." She didn't move. She didn't speak. She was a statue of ice. "Brittany," Declan screamed. "Tell them it's a lie. Tell them we're having a baby." She slowly turned her head to look at him, and in that moment the mask fell completely. There was no love in her eyes. There was no fear. There was only contempt. "You are such an idiot, Declan," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. Declan made a sound like a wounded animal. He lunged over the railing of the witness box, reaching for her. "Bailiff," the judge shouted. 2 officers grabbed Declan before he could reach the plaintiff's table. He was screaming, sobbing, fighting against them. "Why," he wailed. "Why did you do this to me?" Prescott turned to the judge. "The defense rests, Your Honor. I sat at the table watching my son being restrained by the bailiffs. I felt no joy. I felt no victory. I just felt a profound, exhausting sadness. I had saved his wallet. I had saved his future from a lifetime of debt. But I couldn't save his heart." The judge looked at the chaos in his courtroom. He looked at the forged mortgage. He looked at the fake medical records. He looked at Brittany, who was now checking her fingernails as if she were waiting for a bus. He took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes. "Counsel, approach the bench," the judge said. And then he looked at Declan and Brittany. "Mr. and Mrs. Ford," he said, "before I refer this entire file to the district attorney's office for perjury, fraud, and conspiracy, I have one question for you." The room went silent. Even Declan stopped struggling. "Who wants to go to prison first?" The courtroom air was heavy, the kind of stifling pressure that precedes a tornado. The real estate fraud had been exposed, leaving a crater in the center of the plaintiff's case, but my lawyer Prescott was not a man who believed in mercy. He believed in total annihilation. He stood in the center of the room, holding the sealed envelope that contained the final audit of my family's deception. He looked at the judge, then at the jury, and finally his eyes locked onto Brittany Ford. She was sitting rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the table, her face a mask of porcelain indifference that was beginning to rack around the edges. "Your Honor," Prescott said, his voice dropping to a register that commanded absolute silence. "We have one final piece of evidence to submit. This goes to the heart of Count 2, the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress regarding the endangerment of a high-risk pregnancy. The judge nodded, his face unreadable. Proceed. Prescott opened the envelope. The sound of tearing paper was the only noise in the room. He pulled out a certified medical file, thick and heavy with stamps from the county clerk. He didn't walk to the witness stand immediately. He let the anticipation build. He let Declan sweat. My son was looking at the document with a mixture of confusion and terror, the look of a man who realizes he is standing on a trapdoor but doesn't know where the lever is. Mr. Ford, Prescott said, walking to Declan. You testified earlier that your father's refusal to pay for the house caused your wife such severe stress that it endangered the life of your unborn child. Is that correct? Yes, Declan whispered. His voice was a rasp. We were terrified. We still are. And you have seen the ultrasounds. You have been to the appointments. I have seen the pictures, Declan stammered. Brittany goes to the appointments alone. She says I make her nervous. She wants to protect me from the stress. I closed my eyes for a second. The naivety was painful. He was 32 years old, yet he was still a child playing house, blindly trusting a woman who had turned him into a weapon against his own father. Prescott handed the document to Declan. Please look at Exhibit F, Prescott said. This is a subpoenaed medical record from North Star Women's Health Clinic. It is dated August 14th, 3 years ago. Declan took the paper. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled against the microphone. He squinted at the text, his brow furrowing as he tried to decipher the medical jargon. I don't understand, Declan said, looking up at Prescott. What is this? Read the procedure line, Mr. Ford. Read it out loud for the jury. Declan looked back down. He swallowed hard. Bilateral. Salpingectomy. And do you know what a bilateral salpingectomy is, Mr. Ford? No, Declan said. He looked at Brittany. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at a spot on the wall, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Brittany. What is that? When he got no answer, he looked back at Prescott. It is the surgical removal of both fallopian tubes, Prescott said. The words hung in the air like smoke. It is a permanent sterilization procedure. It means, Mr. Ford, that your wife cannot get pregnant naturally. It means she has been sterile for 3 years. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the room. The jury looked at Brittany. The judge looked at Brittany and Declan. Declan looked at the piece of paper as if it were a death warrant. No, he whispered. That is wrong. That is a mistake. She showed me the test. She showed me the ultrasound. It is on my phone. Prescott turned back to the defense table and picked up a large display board. He flipped it over. It was a blown-up image of the ultrasound Brittany had texted me that first night. We had our forensic digital team analyze this image, Prescott said. It is a stock photo, Mr. Ford. It is available for download on Getty Images for $12. The metadata shows it was edited in Photoshop on the morning of your dinner at Le Monde. Declan stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. He looked at the blown-up image, then at the medical report in his hand. The reality crashed into him with the force of a freight train. The nursery, the names they had picked out, the future he had sold his soul to secure. It was all smoke. It was a fiction created to manipulate him into stealing from me. He turned to Brittany. His face was no longer pale. It was red, flushed with a primal, agonizing rage. You lied, he screamed. His voice broke a raw, guttural sound that made the stenographer flinch. You let me sue my father for a fake baby. Brittany didn't move. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize. She slowly turned her head to look at him, and the look in her eyes chilled me to the bone. It wasn't shame. It was annoyance. She looked at him like he was a tool that had broken in her hand. "Sit down, Declan," she hissed. "You are making a scene." "Making a scene," Declan roared. He lunged toward her, grabbing the edge of the table. "I stole a car for you. I went to jail for you. I destroyed my relationship with my dad for a baby that doesn't exist. Order," the judge bellowed, banging his gavel. But Declan was beyond order. He was a man watching his life incinerate. He grabbed her purse, the expensive designer bag I had likely paid for, and dumped it on the floor. "Where is it?" he screamed, kicking through her lipstick and keys. "Where is the proof?" "Show me the proof." Brittany stood up, her composure finally snapping. "You are pathetic," she yelled back, her voice shrill and ugly. "I did what I had to do. You were too weak to get the money on your own. I had to give you a reason to fight. I had to give you a spine, so you faked a pregnancy. You faked a life. I secured our future," she screamed. "Or I would have if your father wasn't such a selfish, hoarding old man." The bailiff moved in, putting a hand on Declan's chest to push him back into his seat. Declan collapsed, putting his head in his hands, sobbing. It wasn't the fake crying from earlier. This was the sound of a man realizing he was the villain in his own story. I sat there watching them tear each other apart. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no vindication. I just felt tired. I looked at the son I had raised, the boy I had taught to fish, to ride a bike, to tell the truth. He was broken. And I knew with the cold certainty of an auditor that he would never be whole again. The money I had saved, the house I had protected, none of it could fix this. The judge watched the chaos for a moment longer, then banged his gavel one final time with a force that echoed like a gunshot. "Enough," he shouted. The room fell silent. The only sound was Declan's ragged breathing. The judge looked at the forged mortgage on his bench. He looked at the fake medical records. He looked at the transcript of the lies told under oath. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of profound exhaustion. He leaned forward, his eyes hard as flint. He looked at Brittany, standing defiant amidst the wreckage of her lies. He looked at Declan, slumped and broken. "Counsel," the judge said to Sterling, "your clients have committed perjury in my courtroom. They have submitted forged documents into evidence. They have engaged in a conspiracy to defraud this court and the defendant." Sterling was silent. He was already packing his briefcase, trying to distance himself from the radioactive fallout. The judge fixed his gaze on the two defendants. "Mr. and Mrs. Ford," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office immediately. You are looking at charges of grand larceny, fraud, forgery, and perjury." He paused, letting the weight of the law settle on their shoulders. "But before I have the bailiff take you into custody, I have one question. A question of logistics." He looked from Declan to Brittany. "Since there is clearly no baby to worry about, and since you both seem so eager to blame the other for this catastrophe..." The judge leaned over the bench, staring them down. The judge's question hung in the air, like the blade of a guillotine waiting to drop. "Who wants to go to prison first?" It was a rhetorical question, but Brittany answered it with a scream that shattered the last remnants of dignity in the courtroom. She did not volunteer. She pointed a manicured finger at her husband. "It was him," she shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "He made me do it. He was obsessed with the money. He said his father owed him. I was just trying to support my husband. I am a victim here." Declan looked at her, his eyes wide with betrayal. The woman he had stolen, for the woman he had gone to jail for, was throwing him to the wolves without a second thought. Something inside him finally snapped. He didn't yell. He lunged. He scrambled over the defense table, scattering legal pads and water pitchers, grabbing for her arm. "You are a liar," he roared, his face twisted in anguish. "You sterilized yourself. You let me paint a nursery for a ghost. You are the monster." The courtroom descended into absolute chaos. Two bailiffs tackled Declan, pinning him to the floor while he kicked and sobbed. Brittany stood over him, smoothing her dress, looking at the judge with wide, innocent eyes, but the judge was not looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with the cold calculation of a man who had seen every variation of human greed and was impressed by none of them. "Take them both," the judge ordered. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a distinct mechanical click. It is the sound of a ledger closing. I watched as they hauled my son to his feet. He was weeping openly now, looking at me, mouthing the word "Dad" over and over. I did not look away, but I did not stand up. I did not reach out. He had made his choice when he forged my signature. He had sealed his fate when he tried to cash in on his mother's memory. Brittany did not cry, she cursed. She screamed at her lawyer, at the judge, and finally at me. "You old miser," she spat, as they dragged her toward the side door. "You can't take it with you." I watched the heavy door close behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the scratching of the court reporter's stenotype. The sentencing hearing 2 months later was a formality. The evidence Prescott and I had compiled was insurmountable. The forensic trail of the real estate fraud, the forged power of attorney, the fake medical records, it was a perfect storm of criminality. Declan stood before the bench in an orange jumpsuit, looking 20 pounds lighter and 10 years older. The judge showed a sliver of mercy, recognizing that he had been manipulated by a master. But the law is the law. For grand larceny, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud, Declan Ford was sentenced to 3 years in state prison. Brittany was next. She stood defiant to the end, refusing to admit guilt, claiming she was a victim of a vindictive father-in-law. The judge was not amused. He called her the architect of the ruin. He cited her history of deception, the premeditated nature of the sterilization cover-up, and her lack of remorse. Brittany Ford was sentenced to 5 years. As the gavel came down, finalizing the destruction of my family, I felt a strange sense of equilibrium. The accounts were balanced. The fraud was exposed. The thieves were removed from the payroll. It was the most painful audit of my career, but it was also the most necessary. I walked out of the courtroom alone, stepping into the cold Chicago afternoon. I had no son to call. I had no grandchild to spoil. But I had my integrity. And in a world full of lies, that had to be enough. I sold the house 3 weeks after the sentencing. It did not take long. In a market starved for inventory, a well-maintained colonial in the suburbs is a hot commodity. I did not haggle over the price. I did not care about the closing date. I just wanted to be gone. The walls of that house held too many echoes now. I could still hear Declan screaming in the hallway. I could still see the ghost of the son I thought I had raised, standing in the kitchen, demanding money he had not earned. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a museum of a failed family experiment. I moved to the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. My new living room has no fireplace for family portraits. It has floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over Lake Michigan, a vast cold expanse of blue that changes color with the mood of the sky. It is sterile. It is quiet. It is perfect. There are no creaky floorboards here to remind me of the past. There is only the hum of the city below 1 million lives, running their own audits, making their own mistakes. Yesterday, I met with the dean of the University of Chicago Business School. I handed him a check. It was a cashier's check, certified funds drawn from the very retirement accounts Declan had tried to raid. The amount was exactly $2 million. The exact sum of the lawsuit. The exact price tag they had put on my dignity. We established the Catherine Ford Memorial Scholarship. It will provide full tuition for underprivileged students studying forensic accounting. Students who understand the value of $1. Students who know that you do not get ahead by stealing from the people who love you. You get ahead by finding the truth in the numbers. It was the only way to clean the money. It was tainted by their greed, so I washed it with charity. I like to think Catherine would have approved. She always wanted to help children. Now she will help hundreds of them, just not the one who broke her heart. I sat on my balcony tonight as the sun went down, turning the lake into a sheet of hammered copper. I poured a glass of the 2012 Dom Perignon. The same vintage Brittany had ordered at Le Monde that first night. I drank it slowly. It tasted crisp, clean, and expensive. It tasted like victory, though a victory that leaves a bitter aftertaste. My phone buzzed on the glass table. The screen lit up. The caller ID did not show a name. It showed a location. Cook County Correctional Facility. It was Declan. It was his one phone call for the week. He probably wanted money for the commissary, or maybe he wanted to say he was sorry. Or maybe he just wanted to blame me one more time for the consequences of his own handwriting. I looked at the phone. I looked at the city lights blinking on one by one like stars in a concrete sky. I thought about answering. I thought about hearing his voice. But an auditor knows when an account is a total loss. You do not throw good money after bad. You do not invest emotional capital in a bankrupt enterprise. You write it off. You close the book. I reached out and pressed the button on the side of the phone. I didn't just decline the call. I opened the settings. I found the number. I selected block caller. The phone went dark. The buzzing stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't lonely. It wasn't sad. It was the sound of a balanced ledger. It was the sound of a life that finally, after all the noise and the lies and the theft, belonged entirely to me. They say money cannot buy happiness. Perhaps that is true. But as I sat there high above the world, sipping my champagne in the quiet of my own making, I realized something important. Money might not buy happiness, but it can buy a hell of a lot of peace and quiet. And right now, that is more than enough for me. I learned that being a parent does not mean being a doormat. We often think that giving our children everything is love, but sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. Enabling their greed only cripples their character. My son wanted a shortcut to the life I spent 40 years building, but he forgot that the true foundation of wealth is not money, it is integrity. Without that, you are just a bankrupt man in a fancy suit. Protect your peace, protect your assets, and never let anyone, not even family, weaponize your emotions against your logic. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven your son?